with a personal opinion. Genres with age demographics need to remember their age demographics. I'm not saying adults shouldn't read something meant for kids, although we will get into that in a separate section. But I think it is worth looking into why the majority of this genre's readers are outside its own target audience. Furthermore, how the appeal of YA for adults is affecting the output of its products and heavily influencing the material. It can be hard to determine what might be deemed more appropriate for teens versus the heavier themes meant for adult entertainment. The lines are blurry enough as it is, and I'm not going to sit here and say YA shouldn't be heavy or dark or that teenagers can't handle that kind of material. Decades worth of literature proves otherwise. While some find comfort reading predictably good stories, others are tired of having to fish through various categories to find something brave enough to stand out on its own. As fluid of a genre as the young adult section is, it is only becoming more saturated by the year. But there are still lessons we as adults can learn from the more innocent pages of youth, the turning point of our lives, and the ongoing chapters throughout that prove we are capable of change. To live with ongoing experiences we can learn from and strive to become better people. And what better genre to start that journey than YA.
Fool me once and it's shame on me, but you know you better tread carefully. Fool me twice, I'm your enemy. I'm your enemy. Run, you better run. Vendetta, run. You better vendetta.
It would appear the term young adult has come under some debate in the previous years. With so many of the genre's readers being over the age of 18, the line dividing its proper audience has become a bit blurry. Even though audience age can vary, the protagonist is almost always within the target of upper teens, around 15 to 18. Anything younger might be more directed to middle grade, and anything older might be set for the new adult genre. YA is somewhere in the middle. Caitlin Burv wrote on her blog with Ignited Ink Writing, "The most important component of any young adult story is the teenage perspective. There are exceptions, however. We have enough adult books with childlike perspectives that can be rather graphic, young adult novels that read like adult novels for their more graphic content, and new adult novels that often get mistaken for young adult novels because of the age and mentality of the protagonist, as well as the writing style that reads like more contemporary YA than more mature content. Protagonists and their perspectives are just one aspect of what makes a YA novel." She goes on to explain how age plays a little part on what determines said perspective in a YA novel, rather than the emotion that is involved. Quote, "Because the part of the brain that controls emotion is fully developed in most teenagers, they can feel any emotion an adult can. However, they are feeling these things for the first time, making the characters passionate. At the same time, the part of the brain that imagines future consequences is not so developed, meaning the emotion and present moment have a greater weight on a teenager's decisions than logic and the future." Now, according to this article with the University of Rochester Medical Center, this might not exactly be the case, but I think she's on the right track. Teens do process information with the more emotional part of the brain. Quote, "In a teen's brain, the connections between the emotional part of the brain and the decision-making center are still developing, and not always at the same rate. That's why when teens have overwhelming emotional input, they can't explain what they were thinking because they weren't thinking so much as they were feeling. But I'm sure we could have figured that one out. Teenagers tend to be more reckless, prone to peer pressure, and even the ones advocating for such adult advances like activism don't seem to have their reasons rooted with logical solutions, but more emotional impulses. And it's because they are still developing. The parts of our brain to make rational decisions won't be fully developed until we're around 25. Is it any wonder then that the perspective this genre thrives on has to play a key part in decision-making based on emotions? This could be anger, sadness, love, or a passion for something greater. I guess that's why most young adult books tend to favor otherworldly elements like fantasy, post-apocalyptic sci-fi, or altered history like steampunk. Emotions are not only heightened by the age factor, but also the extremist conditions of a world testing those skills further through extreme consequence. The high-strung emotional dependence factoring in with high-stakes choices makes for a very dramatic storytelling experience. Since teenagers are mostly in tune with their emotions, it would make sense why the books would not only direct their stories to this type of motivation, but that even for older audiences reading, they can get back in tune with the perspective from one with a certain mindset. but there are still other factors to consider when it comes to this genre. The layering within these stories tend to take on multiple conflicts, multiple relationships, and subplots of a nature that usually tie together by the end of a book or series. Themes that exist can involve a heavier nature so long as it's woven credibly enough with the story, and even the grittier novels of YA are allowed to take these things to a certain extent, given the nature of its audience range. These stories with so much going on, one would think would have to be extremely complex, yet they read surprisingly simplistic. These stories are allowed to be incredibly intense given their emotional capabilities, with the freedom that allows them to explore beyond normal boundaries. This means conflicts are also heightened, allowing dramatization of even the smallest factors in order to move the plot forward. It's about exploring the unknown, the present, and the human psyche as it changes over time. You would think these factors would make the genre difficult to understand, but that's the art of it. Given the right balance between storytelling and emotional depth, the YA genre tends to layer their plots with casual use of themes, almost like a predecessor of greater things to come. These stories tend to take on a character-driven design, their events falling in line one after another as almost always chronological unless switching POVs. When switching point of view, it's usually in line with what is happening at the same place from opposite sides of a spectrum until they meet somewhere in the middle, or they are joined together by the end. Now, some are better at writing YA than others. There have been a multitude of novels where I felt the emotional factor was taken to unnecessary heights, so much so the protagonist almost becomes a caricature of anyone who might be experiencing related conflicts. Without the right balance, however, these stories risk becoming flat, devoid of any real emotion or conflict. Then there are the ones so obsessed with keeping the readers guessing, they throw in plot devices and plot twists to the point where it becomes so convoluted one loses sight of their real target for the sake of unpredictability. Switching POVs can be taken to an extreme when there are too many characters to follow, or their events are involving too much filler to keep the story straight, which usually ends up just being a distraction from the real plot. But for the most part, the YA genre is distinguished as being the easier one to understand, empathize with, and follow. It shouldn't take too much brain power to become one with the worlds they have to offer, to understand the science behind how spaceships work, or need to be as detailed and calculated as adult mystery novels that are designed to be difficult for the readers who want more of a challenge. One of the greatest things about this genre is how broad its subject range is. You can find anything from slice of life, mystery dramas, extreme fantasy, sci-fi, and romance. Not only do they differentiate from the other genres by existing in one, but they can simultaneously happen within the same book. Almost every subgenre with the YA category involves romance of a sort. Drama is a spice that heightens any conflict, no matter the subgenre, and even things like sci-fi can mingle with fantasy, or history with fantasy, or history with sci-fi. Despite the many types of stories YA has to offer, there is one constant, and that is the coming-of-age story. I don't think it's any surprise that a genre meant for teens is all about the change that comes with puberty, adolescence, and self-identity. No matter the subgenre taking place, the plot has to involve the protagonist going on some kind of inner journey to discover something about themselves in order to initiate this change. You could say, well, isn't that the point of any story, any other genre? True. The difference between young adult and those other genres is that this is the first big change to determine the identity of the character. Now, that doesn't sound like much until you realize that first change will be the deciding factor for who they will become and the prediction of future decisions they will make when it comes to initiating further changes in their life. I'm not saying adults don't have bigger decisions to make, but it's in self-identity. Will these characters be the kind of people to more so go along with the flow or against the current? Will they choose to use wit as their primary source of conflict or continue to be bullheaded? Will they be able to learn from their experiences more so about themselves, or will circumstances be the result of a change in identity? According to more recent surveys, readers don't exactly feel the need to stay in their age range where literature is concerned, and even when they are looking for specific genres, they will tend to stray to the YA section first instead of just heading straight to their genre of choice. So, what exactly is the appeal? There's definitely been some debate on who young adult is meant for, the preferred demographic, and whether or not anyone outside of that target audience really should be taking up these books on the regular. I don't think any other genre has really sparked such debate as this one. It appears as if the majority of people involved in this discussion don't really care who reads it. Most think people should be able to read whatever they want, and there isn't actually an age limit for the genre.
The tweet was, my 15-year-old niece told me she likes reading Tessa Bailey and I nearly fainted. A lot of people hopping out of pocket. Someone said, what you're looking for is clean romance. That's the name of the genre. However, I was reading Mills and Boone when I was 12. I read these things that weren't age appropriate for me when I was younger, and I'm fine. Are you fine though? Probably not. But like, I would like my niece to have access to more realistic representation for her age range and a balanced reading experience since that is available to her. Again, valid, rational thought we're having here. Another tweet with a photo that is a picture of a young adult section at a Target. Rebecca said, this is the photo in question. Don't want to tag anyone because I see where they're coming from, but my hot take is that almost every book here is or should be considered YA. I'm sorry, but this is what teens read. They have shit to figure out and books are a safe place to do that. I don't know who originally posted the Target shelf, but I'm obviously gonna have a photo on the screen, but I'm also gonna talk about the books that are in it. And so we can BFFR together with this person saying these should be YA. All Your Perfects, Maybe Someday, Confess, a bunch of Colleen Hoover books. The Love Hypothesis, The Cheat Sheet, The Spanish Love Deception, Verity, again, more Colleen Hoover. Daisy Jones and the Six, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, The Atlas Six, Neon Gods, The Maidens, Wicked Beauty, A Court of Thorns and Roses, A Court of Mist and Fury, A Little Life, The Silent Patient. That's what's in this photo. I don't know what category you would put Colleen Hoover in. I mean, I know the girlies are reading it, but I don't know if that's like good for a 15-year-old. Again, I don't have children. I don't know. Verity, no. Like, no, I just don't think, no. Neon Gods, I think, is too much. Neon Gods and Wicked Beauty by Katie Robert Bloomsbury rebranded the A Court of Thorns and Roses books to make them adult, but yet they're in the young adult section. Every Target probably doesn't look like this, and who knows who set this up, but it's just like, ugh, some of these. And then A Little Life, the book that I hear is literally trauma porn, page 1 to page the end. Mary said, I want people to understand that by mislabeling adult books as YA is one thing that will make it more difficult for teen librarians and public libraries, school librarians and teachers to fight against actual censorship in the current state of book bans. Moms for Liberty and their ilk are already judging actual YA books written expressly for and about teens for what they consider to be adult content when there's sex or swearing. If you're dropping adult books into teen sections, you're giving them ammo to keep digging.
A survey was done in 2012 to show that more than 55% of people who buy young adult novels are adults. According to Publishers Weekly, when confronted about whether or not they are buying for others, 78% admitted purchases were for personal reading. Even though this was over a decade ago, the number of adults reading YA seem to only be increasing. Books, Bones, and Buffy created a poll just 2 years after showing not only the majority of YA readers being adult, but just how diverse the reading of these individuals of older ages are and still prefer young adult over any other genre. Today, whether we are on Book Talk, BookTube, or visiting our local bookstore, it's easy to see this genre has only blown up over the years. But why? Some believe it is the escape appeal that most in this genre offer. There is a sort of whimsy to young adult where the young imaginations are more vivid, intentions are more innocent, and emotions are more personal than any other genre. Unlike middle grade fiction, modern young adult has been incorporating ever more mature themes and debates to put up for discussion that even some adult genres aren't comfortable getting into. While these topics are usually more subtle for adult genres because of the emotional factor in YA, these discussions have to be more forward and centered in their storytelling. Adult topics like those in politics are usually getting introduced to teenagers who will be able to start comprehending them for the first time. These topics are brought up often enough in the story to remain obvious. This is one reason I think the dystopian novels were such a hit at their time, given political tensions rising and the constant fear of what was to come. There were so many emotions to consider, heightened feelings of helplessness, the struggle to break out of conventional expectations, and a desire to find our place in a time where we feel like we have to blend in. Teenagers are already being presented with the struggle to define themselves, to discover their desires, their purpose, and their place in the world. Heavier topics like that, which involves mental health, were also on the rise around this time, simultaneously giving us insight as to the deep, impressionable sense of purposelessness and malaise that can overcome those who don't yet know where they fit in or feel like they might never belong. The feeling of being lost, dazed, and alone can be one of the most overwhelming sensations even for adults. Today, we are seeing more and more on topics such as diversity, rebellion against conventional standards, and sexual openness. It would appear writers delving into these topics aren't merely doing it for the sake of the demographic, but see it as a necessity to open up the discussion before it is tucked away again. This genre gives writers the freedom to explore these harsher subjects through the rose-colored lens of a fairy world or the grungy tableau of post-apocalyptica. It's not just teenagers that the genre is even meant for, with most writers seeming to have awareness as to who their readers are and what exactly they're looking for. Older YA series like that of Harry Potter and the Chronicles of Narnia or even Twilight are just a few examples revealing readers today have a strong desire to escape into fantastical worlds that still relate to the struggles of their own. It is made pretty obvious then how these books have managed to form the most modern YA worlds created in recent years. Magical academies, romantic cryptids, and secret portals to a hidden world all seem to trace back to this triangle. So is it any wonder why nostalgia is set to play a huge role in adults reading YA? John Green even writes that for him it is the first time, and I would have to agree. But I don't think it's just the first time for love, the first kiss, or the intimacy. It's about the first time we truly start to find out who we are and what we want to become. It would seem people are getting more in touch with their self-identity and more accepting of change. We don't stop after we hit puberty, after all. We don't even reach our full potential or sense of identity until after 25, even after 30, and there is always the chance to be different if we don't like what we've become. That being said, adults, please remember, you are adults. While I don't think readers should tie themselves down to any genre, I do think it's worth taking note the level of influence readers have on the market. It's no secret that whatever sells a lot makes a lot, and trends are easier to chase at the earliest. This in turn produces more and more of the same for writers, agents, and publishers to make the most based off a statistic. And I get it. It's hard enough being a writer. It's not easy to sell a book in a market where anyone can publish anything, and we're all fighting for attention because of the level of saturation. There are so many options, we don't know where to turn to. I think this may be yet another reason adults might get stuck in the YA genre. All of these options are condensed into one section of quick, easy reading. Pick one up, put one down, pick another up, put another down. But over time, desires change. You grow. You want something different, something new, something fresh, but with that same kind of format, and suddenly everything you're reading in the section you're used to reading is dissatisfying. So you start to demand more and more and more until the market has converted the genre you loved into something unrecognizable, until you've stolen the very identity of the genre to fit your standards and forced younger readers to adapt to something that may or may not be their own. I love YA, always have, and I'm a heavy critic, so I'm certainly not going to sit here and act like I would never have an influence on the genre. But the reality is the genre is meant specifically for teens. Yet more and more adults making purchases, leaving reviews and comments, and blowing things up on social media platforms with demands and criticisms is absolutely going to have an effect on the genre that isn't even meant for its new target demographic, and with that, I have a problem. One of the biggest platforms right now for the YA craze would be BookTube. A lot of these girls are in that older transitional period where YA is still the preferred reading format, but the material is dull if it isn't as risque. While the mindset is still in YA, there is a side that seems to want more, but I don't think these booktubers realize that yet. Similarly, I don't think they recognize the level of influence and power they have when it comes to promoting books to certain trends. There has been a lot of debate on YA and whether it's real reading, if you're an adult, if you don't like a harder challenge, but that's not what concerns me. Booktubers use their platforms to promote these books, their channels typically going along with the trends of what's hot. Qualifications for expected success is lowered to easier, more attainable goals by writers and publishers who know they only have to promote a trend to sell. Again, this is YA. I mean, the bar already isn't set very high, but I have noticed a drastic drop in the quality of storytelling over the past decade of reading. Stories that fall in line with a cookie-cutter fiction know they only need to cater to the fantasies created by its predecessor that splintered off of readers and writers alike. This isn't just a problem in young adult, but new adult as well. Not only does the promotion of these trends change the content that's supposed to be produced and sold to younger readers, but it reshapes the expected standard to producing a fulfilling story in hopes of selling more instead of selling well. Not only does YA give its readers a chance to revisit their childhood, live out certain fantasies, the market is also quite volatile. Anyone could produce the next Harry Potter, the next Twilight, 13 Reasons Why, or ACOTAR, and no trend in this genre fades out of existence quickly. Rather, there are usually phases that follow as a result of this success. and it can make the trends prolonged, which in turn brings people back to what started them. Chloe Gong, author of These Violent Delights, wrote in an article with the spin-off, YA is defined not by its content or by its subject matter as genres are, or even by the people who read it, but rather by the audience it is aiming to reach. Almost half of YA buyers are older than 18, and 78% of those buyers are picking up the books for themselves despite not being the intended target. While the stories coming out from YA have been award-winning and worthy of study in academic classrooms, YA is a category that incubates overnight sensations and cultural zeitgeists, and when they break out, this often catches the interest of wider media. We could say that the ideal story is one that could build a fandom and absolutely erupt. She goes on to admit YA is not exactly a stable genre, as it seems to wobble and flip at the sight of the latest trend. And this would explain why certain stories, themes, or subjects tend to take off, an explosion with like works coming out simultaneously, as if it had been planned, or following something that took off previously, like Twilight, Harry Potter, or 50 Shades of Grey. This can happen in any genre, yes, but we can't deny the explosion with which these trends follow is nowhere near as fast and as hard as it has been in YA. Plenty of people who used to prefer reading YA admit to have grown out of it faster because of the tropic cliches, the cookie-cutter writing, and the predictability that takes away from the real spice and mystery that gave some of its most prominent novels its flavor. So, what do we do? Whether you are reading YA or not, it is a fact that this genre speaks to people of all ages. Maybe for you, it's the nostalgia, your inner child, or you just prefer the material and writing style. I think it would do us some good to acknowledge those who enjoy this genre primarily and start having these discussions. Telling someone what they should or shouldn't read is never going to go over well. If it's a personal preference, there's nothing wrong with it anyway. But to those attempting to have an effect on the kinds of material within the genre solely for their personal benefit, with no regards for others, we need to remember the next generation. I'm well aware of the marketing gimmicks, and I'm not going to put it past publishing companies to continue to push whatever is going to sell, no matter who it sells to. But if we're not careful, we could end up stealing the chance this new generation has to experience what we did when we first fell in love with YA, the magic, the innocence, the last bit of childhood before moving on to more serious chapters in life. As writers, I think we can do better. As readers, I think we do need to limit our expectations. Maybe one day reading categories won't be limited by age groups. Maybe genres won't have a cutoff point. But until we get there, I hope we can remember those times when stories spoke to us. I hope more people realize when they're searching for more of that same magic, sometimes you have to move outside your comfort zone to find it.